Just so you all know, our rough game plan, the webinar will be around 45 to 50 minutes in length. We've saved some time for questions and answers at the end. If you do have a question come through, please feel free to write it down, and Jason will do his best to answer those at the end. You should be able to view the presentation on your computer screen or a phone or an iPad screen, whatever you're using. And we'll also be providing a handout of the presentation soon after the webinar, so feel free to look for that. I hope you can hear me as you're actually watching this webinar. I've muted the microphone feature, so I will not be able to hear any of you if you ask questions, so pretty please type them. And before we get started, yet again, please just go ahead and track your institution and also how many folks are watching with you, if there are any folks with you. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Jason Langston.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction, and thank you all for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed that music. I have 3 little ones at home, so the Disney Pandora is the only thing I have on my phone. So I wanted to go ahead and provide some listening music for you as we were waiting this morning. I want to first start off with a little context for the webinar, starting with myself. I've worked at a variety of institutions, started off at Northern Arizona University, worked at Virginia Tech, University of Wyoming, and Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and so both public and private, large and small programs. I do have a hard science background, and so a little bit more cut and dry, although I've learned to live in the gray working in residence life. I came back to Embry-Riddle in 2012 as the Associate Director for Student Life, and at that time I was in charge of residence life, campus programming, and Board of Campus Activities, fraternity sorority life, and the University Union. We had a restructure in 2013. I was named the interim director in June and then the director in December. And so I've been the director here for going on 3 years and have done some different things within those roles and try to put a focus on customer service without trying to lose our educational core. A little bit about Embry-Riddle. We have between 850 and 1,200 beds depending on the year. We have a growing student population. In 2012, we were a student life model, and so we had 1 full-time area coordinator for residence life, and then 2 part-times. One was part-time for residence life, the other and fraternity sorority life. One was part-time res life and campus activities. We try to be efficient and policy-driven, and so we did a lot of our business via email, and really took a lot of the personal components out of it. Our department was known for our ability to say no to people and kind of difficult to work with, and we had low student satisfaction. In 2012, we do an annual survey. Our student overall satisfaction was 76%. The next year was 80. Last year was 84. So at least we're moving in the right direction. In 2013, I became the director. We split and focused just on housing residence life. That year, we also tripled 150 first-year students with only three weeks' notice. And so there were some huge concerns in that process, and I'll talk how we managed that. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. One of the big pushes to how we've managed our customer service and education and our retention and our student population has resulted in a new hall. This is Thumb Butte Apartments. We opened this this past summer. It's a 264-bed facility. It's apartment styles, and it increased our occupancy by 30% in one fell swoop. And so it's very exciting for our students, very terrifying for me as I was tasked with making sure that it was full. It is full, I'm happy to report, but that was one of the outcomes of trying to shift how we did our department. We have more students wanting to live on campus, which enabled us to build this new hall. The flow of the webinar, I'm going to go ahead and talk about education versus customer service, and that they're not always at odds. Really focusing on trying to identify customer needs. How do you provide customer service with an emphasis on education? talk about developing a departmental culture around customer service and education. And then I do have 2 homeworks for you, and we will have time for questions. I think customer service and education really isn't necessarily at odds. There is a sweet spot that we want to try to find, and sometimes it seems that they might be, incongruous ideas. I think the proverbial example is a room change. The idea of, I don't like my roommate, so I want to switch rooms. The educator in me wants to teach you the skills and abilities to have a conversation, to have you advocate for your own needs and desires. The ability to live and work with someone that's different from you is really critical. The customer service component, if I have the room space and you want to switch rooms, why would I not let you do that? And so we want to go ahead and ideally try to find that balance. And we will revisit this topic a few times throughout the presentation. When we talk about our customers, I think that there are really 3 categories of customers. The first are students. Obviously, those are our current students, not only the residents, but also off-campus students. And then also future students. You want to keep them in mind. Our parents, I don't think anyone has not had a parent phone call in any given week, and so we want to make sure that we keep them in mind as our customers. And then also colleagues, other departments that you may work with, and even your own staff. And I think they all deserve a high level of customer service and education. When identifying student needs, I think the first thing we need to do is listen. I realize that sounds kind of elementary, but I think there's some ways to do this in non-traditional avenues. One of the things I train my staff to do, in particular for conduct cases, when you bring the student in, we always ask, how's it going? What's your degree program? What do you plan to do? We ask, how's your roommate going? We ask, are there any work orders I can do for you? Is there anything wrong with your room? It's just something little that we can go ahead and open that door to try to help them out. It brings some levity to the issue. We get a lot of the Wi-Fi sucks. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, we have some old buildings, and have you tried to plug in and some different things. But we're able to go ahead and do that and try to get at some student needs rather than just asking them, what do you need? We also do monthly health and safety inspections. Our buildings are designed so we don't have any common restrooms. Our restrooms are all within the unit, so between 3 and 6 people share that. And so we go around and make sure that there's no mold or science experiments growing in the showers. And we used to go around looking to bust people and get, make sure that your bathroom's clean, and we're kind of the cleaning police. And we shifted that philosophy to making sure that the environment's safe for all to use, but it's also a great touch point to make sure that while we're in the room, hey, do you have any work orders I need to submit? Is there an outlet that's out, a light that needs to be replaced? We can go ahead and do that. Surveys, I'm sure we all do them in various ways. Asking for student input is a great way to do that. Class projects, we teach technical report writing at our institution, and one of the final projects is to, very vague, pick a problem on campus and propose solutions. And housing is often drawn from that. And so I welcome those students and actually reach out to the faculty that teaches the class and say, hey, if you're looking for students that don't quite have a problem, plant housing as a seed, and whatever that may be, whether it's bike racks, the lack of housing, and our students go ahead and investigate the problem, write up possible solutions. They interview experts. They will sit down and chat with me. And one of the conditions that I always have is I want your final report. We get a lot of great information from that. Student needs, I look at recontract rates. And so are we recontracting students at a similar rate than past years, at a higher rate? Lots of things go into that: off-campus market, your retention rate overall for your campus. But I think there's something to be said that, if you've changed your program, or students are our customers, and do they want to continue to be our customers? If they're not coming back at the same rate, you might want to examine your program to see what that looks like. And then the RA application pool. I think that's a great testimony to the department. My goal is always to have a 3-to-1 ratio for applicants to available jobs. And so we're wanting between 75 to 80 applications. Hopefully it's we're able to pick the cream of the crop and not necessarily have to drag the bottom to get candidates to fill positions. But those are all little ways to try to identify the student needs, and are you fulfilling those needs? Here's 2 pictures of needs that came up in non-traditional ways. On the picture on the left, that's a giant whiteboard. It's probably about 15 feet long. It came from the technical report writing class. The problem was a lack of collaborative space on campus, specifically the ability to write on a whiteboard and work out some engineering problems. We're a STEM school. Probably about 40% of our students are engineers. And with half the campus population living on campus, one of the solutions was to put more whiteboards in the halls, specifically in the upper division halls. As they grew in their classes, the need for collaborative work grew. And so we were able to go ahead and do this at a fairly low cost. I've yet to walk into a room and not have this whiteboard used. So the students put forth a proposal, they gave it to us, we were able to go ahead and fulfill that. Nothing that was on our radar at all. We would have never thought of that unless the students came forward and did that. The next picture is table and chairs, and really it was when I worked and was living in the halls, I had an RA that just went above and beyond, and I covered a night of rounds for them. And so I was walking around the halls, and we used to have ping pong tables in all of our lounges. And I was doing rounds. I noticed that every single lounge had students sitting at the ping pong table doing homework. And so their knees were knocking into the legs, and it wasn't necessarily real conducive for the purpose of the table. And I asked my RAs to go ahead and track that for a couple weeks. And about 80% of the time that the table was being used, it was being used for homework and not necessarily ping pong. And so we went ahead, and about half the halls we got rid of the ping pong tables and put in study tables instead. And so just doing rounds, we were able to identify a student need. Customer service meeting education for students. I think when you're talking about customer service for students, there's a desire for it to be immediate. And so they want it right then, right now. When I bring a student in for a conduct meeting, if they have a work order, I go ahead and kind of stop the meeting right then, and here, let me submit the work order right now. It's a 10-second process, and I go ahead and take care of it. At the time, I also explained, like, your light's been out for 3 weeks. That's really on you. Here's the phone number to call. You could have reached out to your RA. Like, it truly is. You saw me put it in. It's this quick, and so I can go ahead and take care of it immediately, get it off my plate, something I'm not going to forget later. But the student had their concerns addressed. Students are also special, every single one of them, and so they want their circumstances acknowledged. This is one where whoever said the customer is always right, I think, is a fool. I don't think the customer is always right, but the customer has the right to be heard. And that was a big shift in our philosophy. We would frequently say no or not hear the student out. And so when I talk about departmental culture, I'll talk about how we've changed that thought process. And I don't have to say yes to you, but at least I have to hear you out. And I want to make sure that you felt heard. So you might have walked out of our office with no as an answer, but you walked out feeling that you were heard and that we didn't demean or belittle you and just kind of brush you off. I also have a philosophy of do what's right for the student, kind of regardless of our policies and procedures, and sometimes you need to bend a policy to make that happen. I had a student who had an internship with ESPN, and had to write an article about a boxing match, and to do that had to set up a satellite to watch it, and came into our office to ask permission to do that. And my initial reaction was, no, you can't mount something to the wall and all this. And as I sat down and chatted with him, it was a box that he needed to put outside his window, and it needed to be out there for about 4 hours for the length of the match. So I granted him the exception to pop the screen off his window for that time. He put the box outside, watched the boxing match, put it back in, put the screen back on, and we were good to go. If I wouldn't have sat down and taken the time to really listen to him and just said, no, you can't have a satellite, dish, I wouldn't have understood the process, and I would have just said no to begin with. And so that's really important there. I also think that customer service is best done face-to-face or over the phone. When we were more efficient in 2012, we really relied on emails to send everything out. And while that's very valuable, especially if you're talking about like a water, shutting off the water for a floor or a building, to face-to-face or to call, 70 to 700 students isn't real feasible. But if you're talking one room or one suite, the ability to knock on a door and talk to, between 3 and 6 people definitely is. And so that's our default now, that if a few people are impacted, pick up the phone or go knock on a door and chat with them face-to-face. It helps us on a number of levels. The education connected to the customer service, as you're talking to them, make sure you explain the policy and procedure. When I put the work order in, I always explain, we can't fix what we don't know. And so, you came in and told me about your light that's burnt out. I put the work order in right now. It took me all of 10 seconds. If you have another work order, let you already know, you can call our front desk. Whatever our process is, I explain it to the student. We want to make sure that we hold the student accountable for their behavior and decisions. This comes into contract releases and some of those sorts of things, making sure they understand, we are going to hold you accountable for us, it's an $800 cancellation fee. But there are times where maybe a financial situation has changed. As a director, I'm able to have some leeway in that. But I also talk to them to say, this is not necessarily the norm. And if you sign a lease off campus, you're not going to get out of it without paying the cancellation fee. I want you to make sure you understand that. I also think that the education sets the tone for future interactions. And so did you treat them fairly? Did you treat them right? And then also setting the tone for future interactions, not only on your campus, but in life in general. I deal with a lot with contract releases and make sure that they understand, you're signing a contract off campus, they're not necessarily going to be this flexible. Or when I do stand, rigid on our contract, I'm doing exactly what any other business would do. So you need to understand that when you sign a contract, it means you're liable for that. And these are the outs. You don't meet that requirement, and so no, you're not meeting that, or you're paying the fee, whatever it may be. How we've implemented here at Embry-Riddle, we had a policy where there's no room changes for the first 2 weeks. I think a lot of schools have this. As I became director and talked to my staff, I asked, why do we do this? And no one was really able to articulate why. It was more of a convenience factor for us. There's a lot of people that don't show, that do some different things, but with our housing database being online and live, I could go ahead and switch rooms and it automatically reflects. I can pull an active roster. And so what we ended up having is we had students that showed up and they didn't realize they were from the same high school and were both coming here. They wanted to be roommates. The other roommates were okay with it. Why can't we just do the swap now? Why do we have to wait 2 weeks? And so as long as it was mutual, we went ahead and did that swap. So much so that we would sometimes talk to the roommates to be like, look, John and Jim are from the same hometown. They kind of know each other. You didn't know your roommate. Are you cool with switching rooms and letting these, they know each other? Oh yeah, I got no problem. And we were able to do that room switch while parents were still here. They're still, able to go to Target or Walmart and get their room set up and do all of that rather than waiting the 2 weeks. It was a policy that I'm sure made sense when we were running paper rosters, but for whatever reason, we just hung on to it. and it wasn't making sense for us anymore, and it seemed to have a student impact. And so we went ahead and had some flexibility in that. Room changes due to roommate issues. We have a strong desire to have people learn to live with others. I think those are valuable skills. I don't know of anyone that won't have a roommate at some point in time, whether it's in college or as you progress in your life. I have a roommate right now. Actually, I have 4 of them. 3 of them are under 5 years old, and there's something there to be able to have some conversations there, and we want to foster those skills. But there's also that balance on, is it at a level where it's not feasible? Is it impacting your academics? I think those are no-brainers. But there's also a component where if I have an open space, why are we not doing that? And so for us, what we've done is all of our rooms do roommate agreements. We do them the first week of classes, and then we follow up at week 4. And so first week, we try to have some good conversations, and then after a month, okay, you've now lived with these people for a month. What really needs to happen, what really is going on. As roommate issues come up, we revert to the agreement. There's sometimes just a personality issue. I found someone, they agreed, they're living by the agreement, but I wake up at 6 and, they don't wake up till 10. I try to be quiet, but I found someone else that also wakes up at 6. It's just a better fit. And we go ahead and try to do that if we have open space and allow them to move. When they move, we do have them do a new agreement, and that way we have that. When I started this process, there was a lot of concerns, especially from the housing side of our operations, that we're now going to have students moving all of the time, and there's going to be so much paperwork and this, and this, and we did have a conversation about are we going to charge for that process? And what we found is we don't have students moving rooms more than once or twice. And if they do come in again, the conversation is, you chose that new roommate. Why is this not working? What's going on? And then as they move to the next roommate, we're able to have a more guided conversation of, as you're picking your roommate, you're not necessarily picking your new best friend, you're picking someone you can live with. So if you're one that's so neat and orderly that your pencils are lined up according to height, and you go to the next room and you open the door and the trash pile moves with the door, it's probably not the best roommate. Move to the next person, try to figure something else out. Triple rooms, like I said, we tripled rooms with about 3 weeks notice. That did not go over particularly well. We had about 150 first-year students in triples, and we told everyone that we were going to untriple based on contract date. So if you applied later in the cycle, you were one of the chosen 150, and that we felt that was the fairest way. So you applied late in the cycle, you got a triple room, and then we untripled based on contract date. So if you apply, the earlier you applied, the earlier you got out of a triple. But in all reality, people that really complained and felt that it was really impacting their academics, we did bump them in the process. And this is one that I initially kind of struggled with finding, because I wanted to be fair, and I felt the application date was the fairest way to go about that. But my dean really gave me a great perspective on that, that I evaluate and really appreciate the principle of fairness and application date being there. But the overarching principle that I need to focus on is student success. And if this living environment is more detrimental to one student's success than another's, and you're able to get one student out versus another, who will you get out of that environment? The student who has a greater impact to that. And so it's not necessarily the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, it is an impact on academic success. We are a really expensive school, and I'm very cognizant of that. I want to make sure that our students thrive academically and come back for a second year and then graduate in 4 or 5 or 6 years. It's frustrating when a student comes here for a year and assumes all that debt but doesn't get the degree from us. And so, when the triple room was at that point where it was impacting their academics, and this is one where I think perception's reality. If they feel that the triple room is impacting their academics, then it probably is. then we went ahead and bumped them and did something a little different for them. Identifying parent needs. I think you're going to get frequent questions. So what are your most common questions on tour days, emails, family weekends, trends in phone calls? You'll get a rash of the same sort of questions. For us, what we do is we ask about them in staff meetings. So I have a front desk, and so we have a monthly meeting with those desk workers, and we ask what were the trends, what did you see this month, and we can go ahead and address those. And then I think you're able to predict some of the concerns moving forward depending on the time of the year. And so, are you having parents looking to try to book dates for flights to go home for winter break or for summer? Are they questioning, final exam and midterms? I think there's a honeymoon period with roommates that's probably about week 5 or 6 that I will tolerate you clicking your pen for about 5 weeks, but after that I'm going to kill you if you do it again. And you call home and complain to mom or dad, then they will call our office and say, Johnny's having a tough time with a roommate. We know that, and so you can kind of predict those concerns in those cycles. When working with parents in the customer service, I think they have the same desire to have an immediate solution. They also seem to want to be anonymous. And what I always try to do is I want to try to focus on the student rather than the parent. I want to talk to the student. Often it's the parents that has the issue, not necessarily a student. And so sometimes it's calming the parent down and really trying to say, yeah, I appreciate this. I thank you for giving me a call. Let's go ahead and get the student involved and let me talk to the student. It's beneficial sometimes to engage the parent and have them call the student and set up an appointment, or you call and get something going. Acknowledge that their child is special, that that they have something going on specific to them, that you want to work through their specific issue. The idea of, we get 50 of these a day doesn't necessarily appease the parent. For FERPA, I think it's a 50-50. Sometimes the parents understand, and yeah, that makes sense, and other times, no, if I'm paying the bills, you need to tell me this, or this. I get a lot of parents that struggle with the idea of I'm doing the contract or I'm doing this, and really to try to explain to them, I appreciate that, but it's really the student's contract, that the one living with me. When I was at the University of Wyoming, our director of counseling at orientation always talked about wanting to enable the students to handle their own problems and issues, which will help them when they graduate not live in their basements and move back home. And so to have that conversation with parents of part of college is not just learning to become, for us, pilots and engineers and James Bonders and business people, but being responsible adults and being able to take care of your own business. And your student is going to graduate and find an off-campus accommodation. And if you call a landlord, they're going to laugh at you. Your name's not on the lease. They don't want to talk to you. This is a safe environment. Have them come into my office. We can help them out. I've also found that with parents, a little extra goes a long, long way. And so, when we go ahead and I talk to a student, I usually have, encourage them to, your mom called me. I talked to them about this, this, and this, and work through the issue. I asked the student to call home, and then a couple days later, I called mom back and try to close that loop. And you would have thought that I, did the world a difference in that, and really it was a 5-minute phone call to say, hey, I talked to your son or daughter a couple of days ago. Were they able to connect with you? Yes. Were they okay? What did they explain to you? How did it go? And thank you so much. Perfect. Awesome. And it really helps with that customer service piece. On the education side, I always thank them for calling me, no matter how annoying or ridiculous the request is. They're concerned about their student and their student success, and I can't fault them for that. I always explain policies and procedures. Why do we have them? Why do we want to talk to the student, not the parent? What's the educational outcome for that? What's going on further? And then always encourage the student participation and focus on the college as a holistic growth period. And so it's the idea of they're learning skills and abilities beyond the classroom. and learning to talk to administrator quite frequently is one. This is a picture of us moving a student who was sexed in our system, and so when they applied for admission, they were put in as a female, but they were not. And so they moved in and had a bunch of female roommates, and he was not. And so there were some issues. A lot of parents had some concerns. We were able to go ahead and find a new room. These are 3 of my staff members moving him from the moment that the concern hit our table to the student, the male student being in a new room was 20 minutes. And all parents were appreciated. The students were appreciative. I was able to go ahead and pull a couple staff members that weren't working check-in tables. Hey, we made a mistake. Let's go ahead and take care of this versus, oh, here's your new room. Here's your new key. Go ahead and move on your own. He was there first, had some of his stuff there, and we were able to go ahead and do that quickly. And that's one of those little things that go a long way. This is a student that is still here. He's now a senior, and I still know him on a first name basis, and he says hi and waves with all 5 fingers. And this is the first interaction I had with him. It was our mistake, but I think the way we handled it went well and set the tone for a good relationship. Other ways we implement this, wellness checks. We get phone calls from parents concerned for whatever. We always will reach out to the student. We refuse to let the parent be anonymous, and parents often are frustrated by that. But we talk to the parent and explain that if you want us to be a support system for the student, it needs to be based on trust. And so we will talk to your student to say, hey, your mom called today and was worried. She hasn't talked to you in a couple of days. What's going on? Or you talked to her last night and said you're failing all your classes. Are you going to classes? Whatever it may be. I will say with some exceptions, depending on the scenario, that I can see some family dynamics where we wouldn't necessarily involve and say the parents called, but 9.5 out of 10 times, if we're going to do a wellness check based on a parent phone call, we're going to let the student know. Often the student is kind of embarrassed by it, and I always tell them, look, everyone has parents. I appreciate that yours are concerned about your success, and don't worry about it. This is what we're here for. I'm not going to post it to Facebook. It's not going to go on Snapchat. Just call home. We're worried about you. They're worried about you, and kind of go from there. We had another student whose folks were worried about them living with a transgendered roommate. The daughter chose that person. They met up on a Facebook group for incoming first-year students, and it was really the parents had the concern with that. And so as I worked through the parents and explained kind of what was going on, we didn't have a FERPA on this, and so wasn't able to necessarily talk specifics to the parents, but was able to talk about all the support that we have in place for the daughter in terms of room changes and RA, roommates, and the RA, and the area coordinator and those sorts of things. The mom was coming out to help the daughter moved in. I encouraged her to meet the RA and to meet the area coordinator when she did come out. I talked about FERPA and said, your daughter needs to sign this agreement and all those sorts of things. And ultimately I explained that, I'm not able to talk specifics, but if we did roommate, if your daughter requested as a roommate, we're going to match roommates based on requests, or they're completely random. No matter what, if your daughter wants to switch rooms, we need to hear it from your daughter. And the fact that I'm not hearing it from your daughter, I'm going to assume that it's an okay match. But if I hear from your daughter, we have some flexibility, but I need to know that sooner than later. To come in opening day, might not have that flexibility. The transgender student ended up deferring and joining us in spring, but the mom did come in and meet the RA and the area coordinator and came in and chatted with me and was very appreciative of the time and effort we spent with her and kind of explaining the overall process. Another thing that we do that's kind of unique is room selection. We have a higher demand than supply, so we have a lot of students on the wait list. And so we have communication curtailed and specifically sent to parents. We send it out through our parent association, and so we talk about dates and wait lists and all those sorts of things. how we advertise it on campus. When parents do call in and are frustrated that their son or daughter didn't get housing, we talk about the process. Inevitably, there's no FERPA on file, and so we have to talk generalities, but we do ask the parent to read between the lines. So we're able to say, everyone that applied the day the contract went live got a space. So if your son or daughter is telling you that they're on the wait list and they applied the day it went live, I would challenge them on when they applied, because I can talk generalities and I can say everyone that applied the first day got in, or here are the dates the contract went live, because that's public knowledge. It went live for freshmen on this day, for sophomores on this day, for juniors on this day, whatever it may be. And as I've gone through that process, I've had another number of parents to say, oh, so basically my son or daughter didn't apply early enough, or is not initially being honest with me, whatever it may be. I also, when I talk about FERPA, offer to walk the student through, if they come into my office, on how to add parents to that process. And they can do it online for us through Campus Solutions, which is our database for student information. But explain that to the student and to the parents, and explain that it's a campus-wide thing, and encourage the student to do that. When identifying colleague needs, so this is kind of the last group that I'm going to talk about. I think there's a lot of last-minute requests that come in, and so these are the ideas of, can you put these flyers out last minute? I need the billing, put on today, whatever it may be. What trends are those? Are you tracking that? Are you seeing, is there one office that's always trying to get stuff out and with not enough time ahead of time? Are there cycles that you know of? The biggest one that I know of is admissions. And so, when are you setting your rates or applications going live? When are they hitting the road? Those sorts of things. And then one thing that was really powerful as I became director, because I kind of inherited a department that was known to be difficult to work with, I reached out to other departments and said, okay, I'm new. What do I need to do to help you? What can I do to help you do your job? And kind of approached it from that perspective and got a lot of great feedback and information. When working with colleagues, quick answers and responses. I try to make my colleagues as much of a priority as I do student or parent concerns. I realize that they often are trying to help a student or a parent in terms of a question. So if I get an email from our records office asking about full-time enrollment and requirements or whatever it may be, I doubt it's just for their own informational knowledge. They probably had someone asking, and they're helping out and trying to eliminate the middleman and what we call the riddle runaround. And so I know that they have someone that they're trying to get back to, so I try to answer that email or phone call that same day. And really helping them out is going to help our student experience overall. Also support them to achieve their goals and purposes, making sure that a healthy institution as a whole is beneficial not only to our department but also our students. On the education side, I always explain our processes and timelines. I get a kick out of how many people think. First off, it depends on when they went to school. If they went to school 20, 30 years ago, they did live in dorms, and it's a very different beast. And roommate matching alone is more art than science. And to really explain to them, what's all involved. I think of our director of campus safety was an RA in the mid-70s, and he talks about how my staff, a single RA does more programming in the first 6 weeks of a semester than he did in 3 years as an RA, and that probably his whole building did in 3 years as an RA, and it's just a different experience. And so if you're wrapped up in, campus safety or teaching or whatever, you don't necessarily understand all that we do in housing. And so to help them understand that process, that it's not just putting people in beds. I talked to a faculty member that I had a really good rapport with, and as he was trying to, what's the big deal? You're just putting people in beds. What's the big deal? You have a classroom, just put people in and teach. And so try to explain that, and then also learn their processes and timelines. When do you need to get bills on, whatever that may be. Some things we did when we do room charges on accounts, all housing charges go through the student accounts. Frequently the business office would call saying, hey, you need to get charges on right now. When I became director, I had a conversation focused on when and why charges needed to be put on accounts, and highlighted why some charges were late due to our own processes. And so we have a number, they want summer charges on April 1, but we have a number of students that don't find out that they failed a class until late April or May, and then sign up for summer housing, and they didn't understand that. So to be able to have a conversation, if I have contracts live and know that people applied for housing before April 1, I'll get charges on. But after that, I'm going to do them, as they do applications. Our housing apps, we used to do applications for fall, and they would go live mid-January. We did that just because that's always how it's been done. But as I was working with our admissions and our athletic department, they're out recruiting people in the fall, and we're accepting students in September for the following year. And so worked with IT to go ahead and get the application turned on earlier. Now it's live November 1, so students are able to apply and get in to housing on November 1 rather than January 15. Our facilities department, and working with them, there were frequent complaints that work orders weren't being done. Facilities management had some concerns that they had some staff that would get a work order, not do it, and close it. And so what we did is we have the RAs go around weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the area, and follow up on work orders. Hey, you said that the light was burnt out. Did it get fixed? What's going on? It gets some great touch points for the staff with the residents to be able to say, hey, yes, this got fixed. No, it didn't. It also gave us a good point to close some gaps, and yes, this is getting fixed, or no, it's not. And working with staff, try to identify areas of collective struggle and performance. And so these are things that, if 2 out of 10 people don't get a concept or a topic, they probably weren't paying attention. But if it's 6 out of 10, you probably didn't explain the topic well. So what paperwork issues, professional on-call, calls and trends. With working with full-time staff, what are their future career growth? What's their next job? How do we get them there? And then the water cooler talk. I realize no one probably has water coolers anymore, but what is that? And so, when I was an RA, a lot of our staff would go to dinner together. What's being talked about then? What's being talked on your group chat? Those sorts of things, and trying to figure out and what are they talking about. Customer service. Make sure that you have good ongoing training, assessment of mastery of job and related skills, clear, timely answers and solutions. I think that's something that my staff particularly struggles with, and trying to get information back to the RAs. There's nothing more frustrating than when you ask your boss something and it's, I don't know, and they don't necessarily get back to you. 9 out of 10 times there's a resident pressing them for that information or asking them, when's that door going to be fixed? And it's kind of, it hurts morale to say, oh, I don't know. Well, you're the RA, you're supposed to know. So to make sure that you close that, or at least give an update to say, it was called into facilities, parts are on order, whatever it may be. And then try to not let last minute things impact them. I know we try to combine things. So like, for example, in November, when we do our health and safety inspection, we do our closing meeting the week before, and that way during health and safety inspections the next week, the expectation is if you didn't go to the floor meeting, that RA has a conversation with you, connect with you. During HSIs, you probably can connect with most of those students. And so being able to tag team those tasks. Education and talking with staff and ongoing training, making sure that they understand what's a good employee and being able to advocate for yourself, identify their own work style and experience and preferences, and then for them to learn processes and timelines for our department. And the better they understand those, the better they're able to explain it to students. For us, RA, how we've implemented this RA programming. When I first came on, programming was done as a group for all residents, and there was no thought of education. I had a senior RA. We have a career fair that's part of our homecoming, and I talked about it'd be cool to do some resume review before then. And he's like, yeah, that'd be an awesome program. Like that was outside the box. He thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I'm like, that's such a basic concept. And so we did a ton of programs during training and in services, and really try to expose them to programs that they could be educational. We hold collaborative meetings with Housing Residence Life, and so when I first started, the Residence Life folks didn't know what housing was doing, and the housing folks felt that they were just being told what to do by Residence Life. We're a small department, 9 people. I expect everyone to be functional in all aspects of our work, and so we involve everyone in that. So when we have RA selection, everyone looks at the questions. We all know that. Our coordinator and our admin assistant will do the interviews and be familiar with that. And so that cross-training and cross-involvement is really important. We also involve and have undergraduate senior staff. It was initially a budget-driven solution, and so we didn't have money for full-time staff, but I can pay student workers. It allowed us to promote RAs to supervisors. It continues to give great insight into staff morale, workload, stress, but it's not always a sustainable option. In my experience, you need really good supervisors to groom and grow RAs and leadership potential to be a supervisor. And if you have an undergrad supervisor, rarely do they have that ability to grow the next crop. And we've suffered from that. And so it's a potential downfall from that. I also want to talk about developing a culture of customer service and education and departmental values, staff selection, and share some stories. For the values, you want to incorporate them into job descriptions, trainings, and evaluation. Review values frequently. Every employee should be able to articulate the same core values, not necessarily in the same vernacular, but the same concept. And I feel that customer service and education cannot be top-down. The entire organization needs to be infected with them. Everyone needs to do them. This is the top 10 ways to instill customer service from Delivering Happiness. It's a book by Tony Hsieh, who's the CEO for Zappos. It's a company that's well known for its customer service. I highly recommend the book, and it's a reference at the end. But he talks about 10 ways to kind of focus on this, and I'll highlight a couple of them. He talks about it needing to be a top-down priority. I agree and disagree. In the book, he talks about it top-down in terms of, as a CEO, he values that. So he puts that into practice and hiring and staffing and those sorts of things, not just that, if I do it, everyone else will do it. The lead by examples, and there's some other things that need to be involved. Talks about letting customer service reps, empowering them, and so letting staff break some rules, setting some boundaries, but there might be times where a hall director, an area coordinator bends some rules for the best part of, to do what's best for a student and make sure that they're allowed to do that. He talks about firing some vendors and customers. I don't think we can do that. I would love to do that sometimes. I don't think that's a real option. The other 10, he shares the idea of a student or parent who has a concern and it's addressed well is really brand loyalty. I completely agree with that, and it's not just brand loyalty to your department. I think it's brand loyalty to your institution. And so you might lose that student to an off-campus housing, but you're going to keep that student to your campus. You're going to keep that parent to your campus. They're going to have another son or daughter that chooses to come there. And then he also shares about celebrating great customer service and telling stories of wow. How we've implemented this, I implemented the 3 C's, customer service, community, and care, in 2013. And I'm only going to talk about customer service, but it was really important as we did that. I am never in front of the RA staff without mentioning these 3 things. It's always at the core of everything we do. We identify customer service as listening attentively to concerns and addressing them in a professional and timely manner. The customer is not always right, and often our customers are difficult, and it's challenging to provide customer service when they are difficult. I always give the example of Fluffy the mountain lion, and if a student wants their mountain lion as a pet, not as an emotional support or anything like that, but as a pet, you could say no, or you could ask, what do you mean by that, or what's going on, and have a conversation with them. And through that, you can find out that they just think mountain lions are cool, or you can find out that their roommate is stealing their stuff and they want a mountain lion to protect their stuff. It's kind of an absurd example, but the idea is, have the conversation, and sometimes when you have that conversation, there's a kernel of something else that that comes out that you can work with. We set customer service goals. So these are all measured by our quality of life survey that we do every year. And so we're able to go ahead and track and measure these. When we do our staff selection, we want to make sure we hire the right people and do it the right way. Screen people that have a passion for customer service and education, and incorporate customer service and education into the job description. So these are 2 questions that we ask. The policy question we ask for our new hires, and we're trying to gauge their level of education and are they able to engage someone in trying to explain a policy and to educate. For the difficulty working with someone, that's a customer service, and really how do you treat your peers and how do you provide customer service to them. Here's a screenshot of our RA job description. And so customer service, community, and care are throughout the entire document. And so it's another way that we show how important it is to us and that it will be a priority for us. We also wanted to share customer service stories and delivering happiness. Tony Shea talks about wow as part of the vocabulary, so really providing that top-notch, that wow component for customer service. But when and how do you share those stories, and do you celebrate the successes? I think that's important. It also teaches expectations. So if you share stories, you're setting the tone for your department of this is what we do. At Embry-Riddle, we have monthly service excellence. It's hosted by the chancellor, and so you can go ahead and nominate someone from any department. They're dragged up in front of the room. We talk about how great they are, how they went above and beyond, and then there's some financial rewards if you win or nominate or those sorts of things. At semester training, we always talk about our successes, both qualitatively and quantitatively, and share those. I also ask for them at our staff meetings. I'm not real connected with the RAs, but when an RA has gone above and beyond, I want to get that sense, and that way I can go ahead and pull them aside in the dining hall or as they're in the office and thank them for that job. Here's one of the slides that I share with during trainings. We talk about our programming, and then I've made an effort to get to know my RA, and my RA's made an effort to get to know me. Again, with a STEM background, our RAs connect with these sorts of numbers, and so I want to share them our successes. I think there's finding that sweet spot. So it's not just about giving up on the education and reverting to customer service, but providing customer service with education and nature, and what is that balance. The homework I have for you, there's 2 questions. What is one policy, procedure, practice that can be changed or bent to better serve students when appropriate, and how are you going to educate on the exception to the rule while doing it? The example I have was the room change within the first 2 weeks, and we were able to go ahead and modify that to say we can do room changes in that first 2 weeks, and it's beneficial to the students, so let's go ahead and do that. And then the other homework, to ask one colleague, what can I do that I or we do to help you do your job? It's a very powerful question. Often they revert and ask you that question as well, and it opens some great communication channels between departments. So at this point in time, I will open it to questions.
All right, and it looks like there aren't any questions at this time. If you do have questions, hopefully they can be answered through some of the materials that we'll be sending out later. I hope that you all enjoyed this presentation. We thank you very much, and of course, our presenter, Mr. Jason Langston. You should receive the presentation through your email, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for participating, AIMHO. We hope to hear from you soon.